What if the destiny of Luffy and Blackbeard was not just to face each other, but actually to fight side by side? Throughout the entire journey of One Piece, the story has built Luffy and Teach as complete opposites. Light and darkness, freedom and domination, sun and shadow. Both carry the D in their name, which places them in the select group of natural enemies of the gods who rule the world, including the most mysterious and powerful figure of them all, Emu. But what if this legendary rivalry was just a stage of something much greater? What if, at the decisive moment, the worst enemy became the only possible ally? Luffy, the symbol of the sun and liberation, and Blackbeard, the personification of darkness and the moon, could form the most unlikely alliance in history to overthrow the current king of the world. After all, when the sun is not present, it is the moon that helps to illuminate the world. Pretty poetic, right? In chapter 1156 of One Piece, we discovered that Rock's D. Zebec, decades ago, declared that he was in search of two specific devil fruits. And there's a recent detail in the story that makes this hypothesis even more interesting: the possibility that Rock's D. Zebec was actually aiming back then for the very two fruits that today belong to Luffy and Teach, the Yami Yami no Mi and the Hito Hito no Mi, model Nika. Separated, they are already extraordinary powers, and combined, they may be the only force capable of rivaling Emu and the hidden power of the ancient civilization that the world government so greatly fears. This union would certainly not be simple nor stable, but it could be the only way to face the greatest common enemy of the D-Clan. We're back to our regular programming, and in today's video, I'm going to prove to you that it makes perfect sense for Luffy and Teach to ally themselves by the end of One Piece, and how chapter 1156 may have sealed this idea that I've been saying for years. But before all that, don't forget to leave your like and join my crew by subscribing down below and ringing the Skypiea bell. Now then, let's begin our adventure. Luffy and the Sun. From the very first chapter of One Piece, Luffy has carried an aura of light. Romance Dawn, the title of the very first chapter of the series, is the first clue about what he would represent for the world. The romance of the dawn, the beginning of a new era after a long night of darkness. Dawn, just like the sun, has always been associated with liberation, hope, and the end of the rule of darkness, and that is exactly what Luffy brings everywhere he goes. This connection became even devilerer when the truth about his fruit finally came to light. The one that everyone believed to be the Gomu Gomu no Mi turned out to actually be the Hito Hito no Mi, model Nika, the mythical fruit that grants the powers of the sun god. Nika is a legendary figure who in ancient tales always appears smiling, dancing, and fighting freely, radiating joy even in the most dangerous moments. It is no coincidence that Luffy fights with the same chaotic and carefree energy, as if he were turning battle itself into something light-hearted, fun, and even comical. Moreover, in several decisive moments, Oda uses framing with sun rays or golden light shining over Luffy, such as in the liberation of Dressrosa, where his victory is accompanied by a clear sunny sky, or in Skypiea, when Luffy defeats Enel, the god who lived above the clouds, allowing the people to once again see the open sky illuminated by the sun, at the very moment he destroyed that gigantic dark cloud sphere charged with electricity. On top of that, characters like Inuarashi and Nekomamushi have mentioned that the figure who will bring the dawn to the world would be someone from the D-Clan, reinforcing the idea that Luffy is seen as the one destined to shatter the darkness of the world government. And this is without even mentioning the countless references to the sun throughout the manga. The Sun Pirates led by Jinbe, who carry a symbol directly tied to the sun and to the promise Joy Boy once made to the fisherman, and many other recurring symbols, often depicting the sun surrounded by 9 points. The 9 families that represent the D-Clan. Now, whether or not Nika was planned from the very beginning of the series, we need to recognize one fact. Oda has always worked with the theme of a new dawn, filled with sun-related symbolism, and placed Luffy as the central figure of this entire story. Blackbeard and the Moon. If Luffy carries the sun and the dawn, then Blackbeard carries the night and the moon. From the moment he appeared, Marshal D. Teach was surrounded by a dark atmosphere, almost as if he were Luffy's natural opposite back in Mocktown. While one liked the pie at the bar, the other hated it, and so on. It seemed as if they could never agree on anything at all. Yet the truth is that these two had far more in common than they realized. Starting with the same name of the D, the most enigmatic image of Teach comes from one of the rare glimpses Oda gave us of his past. A child wide awake and crying under the moonlight. He appeared there weeping, perhaps out of loneliness, or perhaps because he was unable to sleep. As Shanks and Buggy later suggested, Teach did not sleep at all during the 3-day-long battle between Roger's pirates and Whitebeard's pirates. And even more intriguingly, there were rumors that Teach had never once slept in his entire life. One way or another, That lonely, silent scene leaves the impression that the night and the moon have always accompanied that boy. But among the many mysteries surrounding the character, one of the most fascinating is his power. His devil fruit, the Yami Yami no Mi, has drawn attention ever since its first appearance. Though classified as a Logia, it is the only one that does not follow the typical rules of that category. Instead of making his body intangible, it absorbs everything like a black hole, including the damage dealt by his opponents. Rather than possessing a purely elemental body of darkness, Blackbeard's power devours everything: fire, lightning, light, even physical damage itself. And just to be clear, Blackbeard never actually says that he takes double the damage or feels double the pain. What he says is that the pain he feels is amplified, and I believe the reason Oda created the Yami Yami no Mi in this particular way is the following. Back then, all Logias needed some kind of nerf. During much of the pre-time skip, devil fruits of the Logia type were considered the most powerful abilities that existed, before Oda decided to introduce mythical Zoans and the concepts of Haki. In a world where Logias were seen as practically invincible, Oda had to give each one of them a specific weakness. Take Crocodile, the main villain of Alabasta. He could be touched and harmed by a very specific weakness related to water or blood, which moistened and softened his sand body. Of course, all devil fruit users shared the basic weaknesses of the sea and sea stone, but Crocodile had an extra, more specific weakness connected to water itself. In Enel's case, the main villain of Skypiea, he could be touched and defeated by someone whose body was made of rubber. And in Blackbeard's case, he could not turn his body into true intangible darkness, explained away by the idea that his body was absorbing absolutely everything. In reality, this always felt more like a convenient excuse, so that Blackbeard, with such a broken ability, would at least have one weakness that allowed Luffy some chance of defeating him in the distant future, long before the concept of Haki was even introduced in the story. But perhaps this nerf Oda gave him ended up fitting perfectly now that mythical Zoans are appearing left and right in the series. Which brings us to the reason why the Yami Yami no Mi does not allow its user to have a standard elemental body. Maybe it was never a true Logia to begin with, and what if the Yami Yami no Mi is more than it seems? A theory that has been gaining more and more discussion is that it could actually be a mythical Zoan disguised as a Logia. Just like the so-called Gum Gum fruit turned out not to be a Paramecia at all, but rather the mythical zone of the sun god Nika, it's very possible that the Dark fruit is, in truth, the mythical zone of the moon god. A Zoan linked to some lunar entity would make perfect sense within the logic of One Piece, especially as the perfect counterpart to the Hito Hito no Mi, model Nika, the fruit of the sun god. The moon appears at key moments in the story and has a direct connection with ancient peoples, such as the first time Luffy awakened Nika's fruit, with the minks and their Sulong transformation, with the samurai of Wano, and even with the ancient sky people who, according to legend, originally came from the moon itself. So while Luffy represents the arrival of dawn, Teach embodies the deepest night before it, the darkness that must be overcome in order for the sun to rise. The alliance between Luffy and Teach, the contrast between sun and moon, is one of the central points to understanding the destiny of both Luffy and Blackbeard. It's not just about rivals chasing the same goal, the throne of the Pirate King, but above all about two complementary forces carrying the promise of something greater. The sun is life, freedom and warmth, but it also needs the darkness in order to shine at its brightest. The moon, on the other hand, exists only because it reflects that same light of the sun, and Oda may be building exactly that, a narrative where the two are not only antagonists, but different pieces of the same destiny, ultimately turning against the gods of the world. Imu, the mysterious figure who rules from the shadows of the world government, presents themselves as the true embodiment of this divine tyranny, and perhaps defeating them will require more than just the sun alone. Balance can only emerge when light and darkness collide, and paradoxically, unite. When the sun sets, it is the moon that illuminates the world. And so, once Luffy is momentarily defeated by Imu, as always happens against the major villains of One Piece, and the sunlight can no longer brighten the world's hope, that will be the exact moment for the moon to appear, reflecting the sun's light to help bring Imu's downfall. Can you see the mastery of a storyline like this? While Luffy and Teach are undeniably rivals, one representing light and the other darkness, they are also complementary forces within this entire story. Once again, for the sun to illuminate the world, darkness must exist. And for the moon to shine, it needs the sun as well, since the moon only reflects the sun's light. In this sense, the moon represented by Blackbeard is destined to reflect the will of Nika, and by extension, the will of the D. Two absolute forces which, when placed side by side, could form the ultimate weapon against Imu. If Rock's D Zebec once sought to unite these two fruits in the past, Perhaps it was because he foresaw that only together could they break the centuries-old rule of the world government. With that in mind, the rivalry between Luffy and Teach would still exist, but it would gain a deeper meaning. Before the dawn there must always come the darkest night. And maybe Blackbeard is that night, the final shadow that must rise, not as a mere villain, but as the other face of the very same will inherited by the carriers of the D. So in short, I believe the script for the final battle of One Piece will unfold as follows. Luffy will be momentarily defeated by Imu, making it seem as if the world's light and hope have been extinguished. Blackbeard will then appear and take over the fight, perhaps even being the one most responsible for Imu's defeat. After all, he loves to show up at the end of the party and steal the kill from others. Blackbeard would then take the empty throne, becoming the embodiment of the darkest night. And in the end, Luffy will rise once more to defeat the one who has always been his greatest and true rival, finally bringing a new dawn to the world. Make no mistake everyone, Imu may seem like the final villain, but they are really more the ultimate enemy of Nika and Joy Boy. As for Luffy, his final and true villain has always been and will remain until the very end, Blackbeard. So even if Luffy and Blackbeard end up forming an indirect alliance to overthrow Imu, once that shared objective is achieved, both of them will have fulfilled the purposes tied to their past generations. After that, they will finally be able to face each other to decide their own destinies, and who will ultimately become the Pirate King. Stayed with me until the end and enjoyed this video? Then leave your feedback down below. Your comment is always very important. And don't forget once again to hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And as always, you can now check out the latest One Piece videos by clicking the ones that will appear here on screen. Alright everyone, no doubt about it. Whether you believe it or not, Luffy and Blackbeard will ally, even if only indirectly, until the very end of One Piece.